Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today what I want to talk about is how I would progress if I was starting from absolute zero as a writer and I wanted to learn the core fundamentals of storytelling so that I could then write strong stories with clear themes at will, essentially. So here's how I would go through that process, okay? So step one, I would look up things about script formatting, right? These sorts of things, just to get a general sense of how it's going to work. And I would probably pick up some sort of free screenwriting software. For example, Celtics, Studio Binder, those are a couple of good options. I would look at something free because at that point, it's just a fun thing that I'm doing, right? I'm not selling something yet or anything like that, right? Once I have an understanding of the formatting, then I would go ahead and write a few shorts. I would not place any sort of parameters on them. I would just write anything I thought was fun, and I would write for as long as the story needed to complete. So whether that was 3 pages or 15 pages, it doesn't matter. I would just write and enjoy that writing process and not have any other rules or anything on them. Now, except for the fact that I would finish, right? So I would make it a rule to finish each project, even if it's a bad ending, even if I hate it halfway through, I would finish, right? Because that is something that is going to be a skill set as you move forward, right? So from there, we would probably write, let's say, anywhere between 5 to 20 short scripts, right? And I would bang them out quickly. I wouldn't be super concerned about how they're all working or if they're perfect or blah, blah, blah. All I would do is start with an idea, write, and I would not do any rewriting. After I've written a few, like a handful, like 10 or so, this is when I would start looking at the fundamentals of storytelling, right? So now this is the time to do some research, okay? So this would be reading some professional scripts that I like. I would find 5 movies that I really like. I would look up their script PDFs online. Most scripts can be found online. A lot of them can be. I would start to read those, not super critically, just for the enjoyment of reading those scripts and seeing how professional writers are writing. Then I would also look at story fundamentals, right? I would look at free content, for example, my content on YouTube, and I would start to say, okay, what are the fundamentals? What is theme? What is character? What is character goal, structure? How do I create a scene? How does dialogue play in all of this? What about genre, right? All these sorts of pieces. Now, here's an important piece. I would not spend too much time on this, literally less than a few weeks, right? Because what I want to be doing is writing first and foremost. Now, within this period, as I'm reading these professional scripts that I like, as I am looking at free content or maybe a book or two about the subject, I'm also trying to apply these as exercises, right? Not every script that you're going to write is going to be high art and it's not supposed to be your magnum opus, okay? Some of them are practice. You need to think about them in that way, right? Just as if you were a painter, you would do some paintings for practice, you need to think about writing in the same way, right? This idea that you're going to write this first script and it's going to be your magnum opus is so ludicrous, and you need to think about building the skill set, right? So learn about character and character want, and then write a 10-page script about that. Learn about theme or choice, and then try to integrate that into a story. Learn about the story circle, and then write a few scripts using a story circle, right? This would be what I would consider kind of phase 2, right? Where you're actually starting to add some skill set on top of the enjoyment that you found in stage 1. Right? So at this point, you should still be enjoying this process. It should be fun. And what you should not be thinking about is selling. What you should not be thinking about is showing these to other people. What you should not be thinking about is getting criticism. Okay? All of this, the work that you're doing right now, is for you and it is for fun, right? And so stay in that mindset. Don't place this anxiety on yourself to write perfectly because you're starting out, because you're getting used to this process. From here, I would enter into phase 3. And phase 3 is a big one. This is where I would tackle my first feature-length screenplay. So at this point, I'm going to get an idea. I'm going to do some outlining based upon the ideas that I've been learning about structure, about character, about theme, these sorts of things. And then I would set off to write that first draft of a feature-length screenplay, and that is a 90 to 120 page script. Now, this is the point that a lot of you are going to get stuck on, right? Most writers stop at page 20, page 30, even page 50 or 60, and they do so because they hate their story. They realize it's not this perfect idea that they thought it was going to be in their head before they put a word down onto the page. And that's okay, right? Because again, this is a skill that you're building as much as it is a tool to show people ideas and bring emotions to people and bring meaning into their lives, okay? So you need to understand that you're building a skill set here, not just doing it perfectly the first time. Now, this is also the point where I think most writers that are here, that are familiar with my content and that get stuck around that page 30 point, or they're outlining for months and months, this is the point where I recommend you getting into the practical screenwriting course, okay? In that course, what I'm doing is helping you beat writer's block, helping you beat procrastination, helping you get an understanding of what you're actually doing when you're writing that first draft of a screenplay and how it's not supposed to be your magnum opus and the best thing ever written in human history. And I give you a sense of what you're actually doing. Not only that, but it also gives you a community of writers, okay? So in the very beginning, when you're writing 6-page shorts, it's easy to do that for fun, right? But you're gonna get to page 40 in your feature and you're gonna be frustrated because it's difficult, right? Especially your first time, it is a challenge to write 100 pages of a story. This is where you need the energy and excitement of other writers to remind you why you like this, to remind you why this is fun, why it's enjoyable. That's why I have the community alongside the course, and that's why we meet each Sunday to talk about screenwriting, where I can ask you questions about where you're at in your writing, where you can ask me questions about problems that you're facing so that you can actually get to the end of that first draft. That is going to be one of the biggest humps in your writing, is getting that first draft done. After you've gotten that first draft done, fantastic. Now there's a few different things you're going to be doing. Number one, you're going to set that first draft to the side. You're not going to come back to it for a little while, and you're going to work on your next story, okay? Maybe this is a pilot. Maybe this is another feature, but I highly recommend that you don't return to shorts and that you continue to work on features, right? Now, if you got to the end of that first draft on that other story and you clearly see a few big things that were wrong, write those down, right? Allow this to be a time where you take a second to breathe and you think about what went right and what went wrong. Where did you get caught up and get stuck and find problems? What were the pages? What were you doing? What was happening in those scenes? And what were the points that you were flying through it, right? Where everything seemed to come naturally and you felt like you were writing the best story ever, right? Because I'm sure you have a couple of those moments in there as well. Take that time, write that out, and then you are going to go back to the videos and the books that you have looked at, and you are going to do some reminding yourself on those particular concepts, right? Where did you get stuck? Was it in Act 2, right? Was it around the midpoint? Okay, let's go look at some midpoint ideas. Let's go look at some structural elements there. Were you stuck at the end? Do you feel like your climax doesn't work? Okay, let's go back and let's look at some videos and some books on endings and some ideas there, right? So now you are plugging in this theory into specific things that you have done and written. And that is how you're actually going to learn. If all you're doing is constantly looking at theory, you are not going to be applying it to anything, and therefore you're not going to understand it at the depth to be able to just write good at will. And that is the goal. The goal is to be able to write a solid story at will. Now, you've done this little post-mortem, you're going to hop into the next story. We're going to come back and we're going to do some rewrites later. You're going to hop into that next feature, okay? Ideally, now you have that community. If you got into the course, you have a community to continue to hold you accountable. You can continue to ask me questions, and you can review the course modules about how to keep pushing, what the purpose of a first draft is, all of that stuff to solidify it in your mind, right? Then you're going to get to the end of that second story. Fantastic. Now you have 2 completed features, way faster than most other people are going to do it, right? Most people are going to spend 3 years on a single feature. That's not what you're going to do. You're going to do this quickly, understanding that it is better for you and your skill set to write quickly and clearly see what the mistakes are that you're making rather than overly obsessing over one story for 3 years. Now that you finish that second one, you can come back and start to identify problems in that first story, right? What didn't work and how can you fix it now that you've given yourself a second to step away and be more objective about the story, right? This is the point where also in the course, you can look at the rewriting section, identifying problems in the story. If you didn't get into the course, you can also look at some of my videos about rewriting, my videos about how to identify problems in your story, right? This is where you start to see what the problems are and then what are those solutions, right? And you should look at it in this way because again, the way to fully express your theme and fully get the thing out that you want to say in your story is by identifying problems and solving them, right? Increasing that skill set. Okay. And also, once you do that for a little while, you might want to come back to this second story that you've written and do the same thing, right? Now you're building this new muscle of rewriting, of identifying story problems and fixing them, right? So initially, what you were learning was how to actually get a draft done, how to have fun with writing, and understand that if you're not having fun ever, or if you're not actually enjoying this, then what's the point? And then once you have built that skill of staying consistent with it, continuing to push, now you can work on the skill of identifying problems and solving them, which is the purpose of rewriting. You're not polishing, you're not changing a couple lines around, changing this scene and that scene. Likely what's going to happen is you're going to identify problems and realize that you need to change 50% of your story, 80% of your story or more. And this is good, right? Because if you're changing that much of your story, it means you are learning way faster than most other writers. Most writers that finish their draft, they are going to be doing polish rewrites. And they're going to say, oh, I rewrote it 8 times. And what that actually means is they moved action lines around 8 times and moved a couple scenes around. That is not rewriting because they don't actually understand what they're doing. They're just sort of moving the puzzle around, not understanding what the goal is and not making it objectively better. Now that you have done that as well, now you can hop into another story and focus on rewriting it. And once you have a few of these, now you can start thinking about if this is something that you want to make into a career, right? And only here is the point where you can start to say, okay, this is something I really like, and this is something I'm starting to actually get good at. Now I want to think about how am I going to go from here to, getting connections and meeting people and this kind of thing, right? One thing I'll say about this whole side, right, the selling side and all of this stuff, right, is people will give you a million different ways of competitions and producers and blah, 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 blah. The number one thing you need to understand is that the way that people are getting scripts sold is connections, and for production companies or agents or any of these people, directors, whoever can actually make your story happen, you have a connection with them and you give them some sort of reason to actually take a look at that. So once you have a few screenplays, now is the time to start really getting some outside feedback, right? This could be, companies like script coverage services, right? Like The Blacklist or We Screenplay that are going to give you some notes on your script. These can be very hit or miss, right? You can get great notes and you can get bad notes, these sorts of things. But ideally, you're getting a general sense of where your story is sitting in competition with all of these other writers who are also writing, right? So if they tell you your story is a 6 out of 10, great. Now you know kind of where you're generally sitting. If they tell you it's a 3 out of 10, great. You know where you're sitting, right? If you're getting an 8 and a 9 and a 10, right? That is the time where you can start saying, okay, well, maybe I'm writing at a level that it could be worth sending out to people that could make things happen, right? And also, if you get something like that, like a 9, then what I would also suggest is getting a portfolio of scripts that are at that level, right? If you can get 3 scripts at that level, that's going to be fantastic for you. And ideally, when you're in this zone, you can also be working on connections, right? You can be going to film festivals. You can be meeting with people in, Los Angeles or in New York City, or let's even Atlanta or wherever people are actually shooting these projects. If you're not in the US, where are film things happening, right? Where are the places that you can actually meet people? Be there. Because this whole idea of, oh, you do this, and this, and then you can get it sold, the path is not clear, right? It's going to be connections. It's going to be understanding your leverage points and using them to your advantage, right? The other thing, if this is where you are at, then this is where I would recommend you book a call with me, and we can talk one-on-one about identifying the major problems that are still there in your story. So the reality is that once you've written 3-4 screenplays, this kind of thing, there are still going to be problems in your story. You are not going to be applying the ideas that you've been learning in a perfect way. And this is where you and I can sit down over a long period, clearly identify those problems for you, and fix each of them so that you can finally get a sense of what your blind spots have been up to this point in your writing, right? From there, ideally, now you can actually start to be in that zone where you are able to clearly begin a story, write that draft, identify what's not working in it, and fix it in a consistent way. And this will also come by reading bad scripts as well, right? As you're doing this, read bad scripts and think about how you would fix them. Read more good scripts, right? Keep building those connections, and over time, you will begin to build the skill set of writing. And this is finally where you can start to build interesting themes into your story that other people have not seen, right? How is your feature going to be different than somebody else who's also writing about kindness, right? How is your feature going to be different than somebody else who is also writing a movie that's kind of a Marvel spinoff? How is your story going to be different than just a traditional horror story that we have seen in the past? That is when you can finally start to think about those ideas. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I look forward to talking with you one-on-one or inside the course, depending on where you're at in your writing journey. If you've made it this far in the video, please leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next video.